Welcome and thank you for joining today's Hybrid Resources Phase 2A training. Before we begin, please ensure that you have located the chat panel at the bottom right corner of your screen. If you need any technical assistance, please send a chat to the event producer. To submit a written question, please select everyone or all panelists, write your message in the text box provided, and press enter when you are ready to send. In order to ask a verbal question, please use the raised hand icon located at the top of your chat panel. We will let you know when your line is unmuted. With that, I will turn the call over to Cynthia Hinman. Cynthia, please go ahead.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to today's training. My name is Cynthia Hinman, and I am a lead client trainer here at the California ISO. Today, we're going to review the changes associated with Hybrid Resources Phase 2A project. This session is scheduled to last about 90 minutes, and it is being recorded, and both the presentation and the recording will be posted on the ISO website in the Learning Center. The recording might be, will be in a few days before we get it back. There are a number of SMEs that are going to be assisting me on today's call, and I would like them to introduce themselves. So if you would, let's see, can't see very well, but Mike, could you kick it off and introduce yourself?
Sure. This is Mike Turner, Senior Manager of Model and Contract Implementation.
And Andrew?
Good morning. This is Andrew Ulmer, Assistant General Counsel of the ISO's legal group.
And Amber?
Good morning. This is Amber Motley, Senior Manager of Short-Term Forecasting at the ISO.
Okay. Is Gabe on the call? I can't see my list right now. Gabe?
I don't believe so, Cindy.
Okay. Rada? Rada?
Be helping Cindy with this. Oh, now I'm unmuted. Good morning, this is Rada Madrigal. I'm a lead client trainer here at the California ISO, and I'll be helping Cindy facilitate this call.
Are there any other subject matter experts that I have not named that are on the call? Okay. All right, well, let's get started then. Let's look at our agenda for today. So we're going to start with the Hybrid Resources Overview. We're going to talk about what was in Phase 1, what's in Phase 2, just set the stage. Then we'll talk about the project that's going to be going in fall, which is Phase 2A, starting off talking about the high sustainable limit and ancillary services. This does not have structured scenario, but we will talk a little bit about market sim details in case you want to participate in unstructured testing, and then we'll go to a wrap-up. So let's start with the Hybrid Resources project overall. I have acronyms here, so when you are looking at the presentation later and you need to look something up, you'll be able to use this as a resource. So there are some key definitions just to get us all on the same page of what this project is about. And two of the main ones are co-located resources and hybrid resources. So as it says here, co-located resource, multiple resource IDs behind a single point of interconnection. And each one of those resources is modeled independently and submits its bids independently and settles and all of that. And the ISO will model state of charge, verb forecast, heat rates, and everything independently. So it's basically two independent resources that are, or more, that are co-located. Then there's the hybrid resource. That's a mixed fuel resource with a single resource ID at a single point of interconnection. So the ISO gets one bid curve for whatever multiple resources or mixed fuel resource that should be included in the optimization. And these resources should always be able to respond to any dispatch instruction from the ISO. So So those are two key definitions. Next, we're going to talk about the phases of this project. So the Hybrid Resources Project Phase 1 was where we implemented the co-located resources. It allowed individual resources with potentially different SCs and technologies to share a common point of interconnection to the grid, and it introduced the Aggregated Capability Constraint, the ACC, which is a constraint that limits the set of co-located resources that share common max and min. And phase 2 of the project, that was implemented, by the way, last year in December. Phase 2 of the project is where we are now. So phase 2 has two pieces, phase 2A and phase 2B. We're focusing on phase 2A today, which is the High Sustainable Limit, HSL, and the Ancillary Service abilities. And that's scheduled to go into production in November of this year. That's going to be followed by phase 2B, and I have it in gray because we're not really going to talk about it, but we're going to implement the hybrid dynamic limit functionality, the master subordinate ACC, along with changes to a number of our applications and reports. That's scheduled to go into production May of 2022. So let's start talking about phase 2A in more detail, and we'll start with the high sustainable limits. And once I get done with that, I'll stop and see if there are any questions. So the high sustainable limit, also known as HSL, is a way to have visibility to the production capability of VER components within a hybrid or co-located resource. I'm going to read a quote from, there's an HSL white paper, which I highly recommend. It really explains the whole process, what it's used for, and everything. And there was one quote there that I thought that summarized what HSL is very well. So I'm going to just read this, then we'll move on. The HSL is a real-time estimate of the maximum output capability of a VER resource or the VER component of a hybrid or co-located resource based solely on the resource's physical properties, i.e. the number of solar panels or wind turbines and available inverters, and the fuel available to the resource based on current weather conditions. The HSL will be sent to the ISO as calculated telemetred value and represents the approximate energy output capability of a resource at that moment in time. It's a calculated estimate, not a forecast. So that's a lot of words. Let's look at an example, and then we will talk a little bit more about it. So here we have some solar panels, and the current weather conditions would allow this resource to produce 10 megawatts. Now, the ISO has dispatched this resource to produce 8. And so the telemetry of this resource will show 8 megawatts. But the high sustainable limit, based on the fuel and the equipment, is 10 megawatts. So the HSL provides data about a moment in time. And as we can see here, the HSL does not always equal the telemetry because it is not impacted by any market actions or battery storage, charging, or anything like that. So what do we use it for? Well, we're using it to improve forecasting. So we're having this information is going to improve forecasting for VERs, and it also is the forecasting, so it's going to help determine the regulation requirement for future intervals. It also improves the forecast that will inform the uncertainty risk across the system. So this is not used by the market, but it is used to improve forecasting. So EMS, our EMS system, will receive the HSL via telemetry every 10 seconds for each co-located VER or VER component of a hybrid resource. So it's continuously receiving updated information. The real-time market receives the HSL for each resource ID to be used for persistence forecast. And with the existing ACC schedules on the RTD screen, if you're in BAYOP or whatever, RTD will display a follow dot flag and the ancillary services. So we will talk about ancillary services in a minute. Some key points about this HSL, the high sustainable limit, and the persistence logic. So the persistence renewable forecasting is only available for co-located resources right now, just the persistence renewable forecasting. And if a resource is providing this high sustainable limit, and we'll talk about how a resource provides that, excuse me for 1 second. For resources providing the high sustainable limit, then we can use the high sustainable limit for persistence as long as the HSL is good quality, regardless of the market instructions. So we can take that and use that for the resource. And then if the resource isn't providing good quality HSL, then we can keep the current persistence logic that we have today. If the resource has an ancillary service award, it's going to need to follow its DOT, dispatch operating target. Hybrid resources, if they are dispatched, all the resources within that hybrid have to work together to jointly follow the DOT. Remember, with hybrid resources, we're talking about one resource ID for these multiple fuel sources. So let's look at a couple examples. So first, we're going to look at a co-located resource, and then we'll look at a hybrid resource. So follow your DOT, co-located resource. So the high sustainable limit in this example, the high sustainable limit is available and will be used to inform persistence logic, regardless of the instructions that the solar or battery resource gets, as long as the HSL is of good quality. So we have a solar resource here, 100 megawatt PMAX, and a battery resource, 50 megawatts. Our ACC is 100 megawatts, our aggregated capability constraint. So there's 150 megawatts behind that constraint, but only 100. The ACC limits it to 100. So this resource is under an ACC. Let's say the battery gets an AS award, and the solar resource is then required to follow its DOT. The solar resource will remain on HSL-based persistence forecast as long as the data is of good quality. Now, when we have a hybrid resource, an HSL is not available. In this case, we're going to use current persistence logic using solar component telemetry. So hybrid resources always are required to follow their DOT, and the solar resource will switch off persistence to the vendor forecast for a period of battery AS award. So that's the difference of how we would look at a co-located resource and a hybrid resource. Let's look at what the requirements are for resources to provide this HSL. We'll start with the telemetry requirements. So if you are a new project, you would look at our current new resource interconnection process, refer to that and use that. The HSL will be a new telemetry point that needs to be provided for each VER component, variable energy resource. For each wind or solar component, you're going to need to provide that HSL. You have an ACC. Existing projects, you need to open a new rig reconfiguration project in RIMS, program the rig with HSL, and test it with our EDAS team, and then provide that HSL data to the ISL. Keep in mind that the HSL is not a replacement for megawatt output of solar and wind site, and all VERs must meet the Appendix Q meteorological requirements. I have a link further on to Appendix Q so you can take a look at those requirements. So that's the telemetry details. Let's move on to the metering and settlement details. Individual meter data should be provided for all hybrid components. Again, for new resources, refer to the current NRI process. For existing projects, you're going to need to open a new meter project in RIMS, install new meters for all hybrid components, and again, test it with the EDAS team here at the ISO, and then provide meter data to the ISO. One thing to note with regard to settlements, there's not direct settlements implications, but we'll use the forecast selection flag and the new BER NGR FF flag to identify an NGR resource with the VER component that's using the ISO forecast. And we're going to do that for calculating the forecast fee. So there are more resources for you on this particular topic. Again, the High Sustainable Limit white paper that I mentioned, that's a link to that, and then Tariff Appendix Q, which is for the eligible intermittent resource protocol. Before we move on to the next topic, which is ancillary services, Carice, I want to open it up for any questions.
We do have a verbal question. Michael Volpe, your line is unmuted.
Good morning, this is Michael Volpe from PG&E. I just had a question on the RIMS process. How long will this take for an existing, let's say, VER resource that wants to conduct testing for this before the release?
Mike, can you help out with that question?
Sure, I can. Thank you. This is not a typical NRI process. It requires the full NRI timeline. However, adding a telemetry point is part of our model process. So what we will do is once that RIMS project is created, we will work to see the earliest possible model that we can get it in and be able to, once it's in the model, we can schedule a field work appointment with you shortly after that to test the point and be able to proceed. Does that answer your question?
I'm just looking for a ballpark. I mean, are you talking like 1 or 2 weeks or 1 or 2 months?
Again, it depends on when our next model is scheduled to come out and the timing of being able to get that in the model build. If we're already in the testing phase of that model build process, we most likely will not be able to get it into that model, in which case it would be in the following model. Most of our models now are about 6 weeks apart on average. So it could be, as little as 4 weeks, as much as, say, 10 weeks. It just depends on the timing of when that is created and the timing of our model build process at that point.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm just concerned that going through RIMS for an existing resource would kind of take too long, and we'd miss our window to do kind of our fall release testing for this phase.
So again, you can open that RIMS project now, and we'll work with you to get that into our next possible model and see how that timing aligns with the fall release. Okay.
I do have one more question. You mentioned the HSL data being sent to CAISO at, every 10 seconds. Is it actually being pushed from the rig to ISO, or is the ISO pulling it via the rig?
So it'd be the same way that we're doing it today and getting rig data, and that is a polling process that goes back and forth between the rig and the ISO.
Okay, thanks. And would it be possible to set up that to use existing data that is being currently pulled as a kind of a proxy for a test for this fall release?
I'm not following you there. Can you repeat that?
So we're trying to test the high sustainable limit data flows, functioning from the rig to the ISO. Can we use an existing data stream to test that functionality, or do we have to go through the RIMS to get that new HSL data point set up?
We need to get that new HSL data point set up first.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Michael and Mike.
We have no further verbal questions. Oh, actually we do. I spoke too soon. Sandra, your line is unmuted.
Hello, this is Sandra Morris from Bank and SMUD. Just a quick question. I was sort of wondering why there were these references about the data quality being good for the HSL, and what are you guys envisioning with that? Are you envisioning there's going to be issues with the quality, or I'm not sure why you were, mentioned it a couple of times.
Amber, can you help out with that question? Thank you.
Yes, definitely. So data quality is a feed that we take from the rig for all of the data points. When that data quality returns as bad, there's certain processes that we turn on and off. And that was what was referenced in the slides. And we just wanted to make sure that the customers knew that if the rig is returning bad data quality, that the persistent methodology, which is a renewable forecasting methodology that we use in RTD, all of the time periods of RTD, that then reverts to the external forecast service provider. And that would still happen if the HSL data quality was of bad data quality.
So is it done on an interval basis then?
It's
like
and Mike can cover this more. It comes in with the information, right? So the information that's coming in from the rig also is an indicator of good or bad data quality. So it comes in every 4 seconds for the 4-second data points, and then this one will be 10, 12 seconds.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you very much for the clarification. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Therese, other questions?
There are no further verbal questions, it looks like.
All right. Well, let's head over to the next topic, which is ancillary services. So what's changing here? Currently, the aggregated capability constraints, the ACC considers energy and not ancillary services for co-located resources. With the fall release, the ACC will look at energy and AS when it's making sure that the point of interconnection limit will not be exceeded. So we're allowing resources to provide AS, these types of resources. So let's look at a scenario. So just to set the stage, in this example, we have 2 resources behind a point of interconnection. They have an ACC of 120. It looks very much like the example that we showed you before. Solar resource has a Pmax of 100, and the storage resource has a Pmax of 50. So the ACC limit limits the amount of energy that can be dispatched to 120 megawatts. These resources are forbidden from providing AS at this time. Starting in fall, we have these same resources, same configuration, but you can see that the storage resource is actually certified to provide 50 megawatts of REG. In our example, the resource is awarded 30 megawatts of REG from the storage resource. That limits how much we can get from the total to 120. So we could, let's say, get 90 megawatts of energy from the solar resource. So the ISO market software is going to limit the dispatch of the combined resources to 120, and it's inclusive of the regulation award in this example. So I want to go over one other thing about the ancillary services, and that's how we're determining those limits for the ACC. So for the upper limit, we're looking at the sum of energy, reg up, spinning reserve, and flex ramp up. The sum of those must be less than or equal to the upper limit of the ACC. And for the lower limit, the sum of energy minus reg down minus the flex ramp down must be greater than or equal to the lower limit. So it must be within those limits. So that's just one final thing I wanted to mention about the ancillary services and the ACC. So I'm going to go back and see if we have any additional questions about our new feature of allowing ancillary services for these co-located resources. And then we'll move on to market sim details. Carice, are there any questions regarding the AS?
At this moment, there are no questions, but as a reminder, please use the raise hand icon to ask a question verbally, and make sure you're selecting everyone in the chat panel when submitting a written question. Again, for now, there are no questions in the queue.
All right, we're going to have another opportunity for questions, so if you didn't get your question in yet, you'll have another opportunity to do that. Moving on to the market simulation, as I mentioned, there are no structured scenarios for this initiative, but let's review some of the general details. The release simulation begins today, just generally for the fall release in the map stage environment. Connectivity testing begins today through September 6th, and then structured scenarios are the 7th through October 1st. I would encourage you, if you're interested in participating in the Market Sim, to get on the Market Sim calls that happen, I think they started last Thursday, and they happen every week. So if you look on the ISO calendar on caiso.com, those meetings should be listed in the calendar, and you can find them and take advantage of those meetings if you're interested in the Market Sim. Some additional information about the unstructured scenarios. If you want to request specific market conditions, you can contact the ISO at marketsim@caiso.com at least one day prior to the unstructured trade date. Trade dates day ahead or real-time market run. Day ahead or real-time market run. Regression simulation, again, you would contact marketsim@caiso.com. That is all I have about Market Sim. I'm just going to do well, why don't we stop and see if there are any questions regarding Market Sim, Carice, before we move on to the wrap-up.
There is one question. Your line is unmuted.
Hi, this is Weizhou from SE. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi, good morning. I just entered a question in the chat, but I just ask here. I think in one of your earlier slides, you talk about the schedule. I just wondering, because every time I see the schedule kind of look changed. So not on the Market Sim, but the overall initiative, phase one, phase 2A, and phase 2B.
Yeah.
There's a new feature about the subordinary ACC, so I'm just wondering when that's going to be implemented.
Excuse me, which?
Yeah, sorry, probably way at the beginning. Yeah, this one.
Okay, and ask the question again. What are you asking about?
So yeah, so I just want to confirm your schedule, because the last time I heard it's going to be implemented in November this year. So now it seems in May 2022.
Well, the two features that I mentioned that we went through in this training today are scheduled to go into production November 2021. So the high sustainable limit and the ability to provide ancillary services is going in November 2021. And then this is a short summary of what's scheduled to go into production in 2022. Does that help?
Cindy, this is Andrew. Maybe maybe I could offer a slight gloss that might answer Lizz's question. And that is, this autumn, this fall, we're planning to implement functionality that would allow for master and subordinate aggregate capability constraints at a single generating facility. Today, we just allow for the use of one aggregate capability constraint at a single generating facility. This fall, we'll allow for the use of multiple aggregate capability constraints at a single generating facility. What we're not implementing this fall and what we plan to implement next spring is the relative scheduling priority as between the master aggregate capability constraint and the subordinate aggregate capability constraint. This fall, we'll simply hold their scheduling priority equal, and our optimization won't be relaxing those constraints. Next spring, we'll be implementing functionality so that the scheduling priority is no longer equal, and that the subordinate aggregate capability constraint can be relaxed before we get to the power balance constraint and the market optimization, if necessary. So that's the, I think that's the maybe the gloss I'd offer in terms of phase 2B.
And also, I'm going to put a link here for everyone, which is for the BRS, that gives you the distinction between phase 2A and phase 2B. So if you're interested in reading more about that, you can follow this link.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Andrew. That's very helpful.
All right. Other questions?
There are no further questions.
Okay, well, let's just wrap this up. I'm just skipping through the slides here really quick. So the two key points about this presentation, the first one has to do with the high sustainable limit, HSL, and second, we're implementing the ancillary services. So the high sustainable limit provides visibility to the production capability of work components within a hybrid or co-located configuration so that we can use that to improve our forecasting. So that's separate from the telemetry, or just looking at what the resource is capable of producing at any given time. Second, we are implementing ancillary services for co-located resources. You have to be certified to provide ancillary services, and we're going to be able to use that with our ACC to ensure that we're never exceeding the limit at that point of interconnection. So that is all that I have. Are there any final questions?
There is another question. Michael, your line is unmuted.
It's Michael again from PG&E. If a scheduling quarter needs to test the HSL data for a resource after November 1st, how is that done? Is that through the RIMS process?
Michael, this is Mike Turner again. Yes, that's exactly how we would do it for all existing resources. For all new resources that go through the new resource implementation process, we will be including the HSL point as applicable for the resource in their initial build of points. So it'll go the normal process for new resources. For existing resources, it'll be through this RIMS process, and it'll be as quickly as we can get them all in.
Okay, and for the existing resource, say if it's a co-located resource, which scheduling coordinator has to go through the RIMS process to get the HSL data? Is it the say this resource it's co-located, but it's two scheduling coordinators? Is it both of them have to go through RIMS, or one of them that has the resource of the battery, or?
So the HSL is associated with the renewable resource, so it would be that scheduling coordinator.
Okay, but what if they both have renewable resources?
Then it would be both.
Okay, thanks.
All right. What else?
There are no further.
Okay, before we jump off, I just want to mention to you that, again, I will be posting this presentation after today's session, and be on the lookout for the recording that will be coming. It's going to take a day or two. Also, you can see that Radha put into our chat a link to a survey. And the survey really helps us to improve our training for you in the future. So I really hope that you will fill it out and let us know what we've done well, what we can do better. And we'll take that information. We take it very seriously, and we'll use it in the future. So thank you very much. That's it for now. Oh, I see a question in the chat. The question is sorry.
I was going to say, Cindy, there's a question in the chat, and I'll read that out to you. It says, is the 10-second HSL telemetry requirement only for those using the CAISO-provided VER forecast or all?
Yeah, this is Amber. I can take that one. It's for all co-located and renewable components of hybrid resources.
Thank you. Michael, did that help? Okay, great. One more. I'm gonna stop again and see if there are any other questions. All right. Thank you very much, and have a great day. And we'll close this out now.